Gentlemen, this is Veda Jane Gargar Esula from BTE student, taking a Bachelor of Technological Education, major in Computer Technology. And this subject is about BTE assessment. And, okay, and for my mentor, Ma'am Dorla Tobilia, good day to you, ma'am. And this video is for educational purposes only, and I hope that you understand and my report. So now, my report I'll be discussing today, it's about item response theory versus classical test theory, and this is for group 2. And I'm with my partner, Javi Stocky, and this is my report also. So let's, as you can see on the screen, um, makita nato ang kanang shading bali, this is one of the most common item or test nga or method nga gigamit sa atong junior high or even in kanang mutikta o exam. So muni siya. So makita na to siya item response theory versus classical theories later. Next. So what is classical test theory? Okay, as you can see in the screen, in 1904, which is his first man, in the year 1966, Novik focuses on the same objectives and before the conceptualize of IRT. Kaning IRT is item response theory ni siya, short ra ni siya, and still being to predict an individual latent rate based on observed that score on an instrument in CIT. So the true score predicts the level of the latent variable, and the observed score and the error is normally distributed with a 1 of 0 and CD of 1. So, muna siya. So, where? So as you can see no, naitay gitawag nga CIT equation, x equals t plus e, where x is our total score, t is for true score, e is for error. So understandable na siya. Alright, so next. So what is classical test theory and items response? First is the most important difference between CIT and IRT is that in CTT, one uses the common estimate of the measure precision that is assumed to be equal for all individuals in respective of their attribute levels. Kung may diri nga lahi ang CTT and RNT or method nga gigamit ani nga theory. So in RIT daw, sa item response theory, however, the measure precision depends on the latent attribute value. Alright? So what are the assumptions of classical test theory? Because random error, may yung random is random pinili, random selected, is always present to at least a minimum extent. That is the basic formulation in classical test theory is that the observed score is equal to the true score that would be obtained if there were no measurement error plus a random error component, or x is t plus e, where x is the observed score and t is the true. Right. Next slide. So before we proceed, the item response theory or IRT is also known as the latent response theory, refers to family mathematical models that attempt to explain the relationship between latent traits. It is an observable characteristics of attributes and their manifestation are observed outcome, response, or performance, and they establish a link between the properties performance of the items is instruments individuals responding of these and the underlying traits being measured. Alright, so IRT assumes that latent construct example for this is trust, knowledge, attributes. These are the measure that organize in an unobservable continuum. Therefore, it means purposes focuses on establishing the individual positions in that continuum. Okay, so now I'm sharing with you. I'm sharing the screen again. So first we have stress. Kung may stress is one of the most common issue rather. So stress theory, also matawag dito ang stress di ay is a theory po din siya. It is a social theory that explains observations about stress, an aspect of social life. So may nga na-stress akong life. So muna siya explains observation bali na ano ba nabantayan sa imong kaugalingon nga ay nanani ko stress ko so nakagibuhat through actions with your actions. So ngano siya gay ano nga theory pud siya kay of course maano siya sa ano sa klase nga mo jud siya ang stress theory is a social theory. So theories use concepts that represent classes of phenomena to explain observation. Alright? So next, we have the knowledge. So knowledge, without knowledge, wala kay ma-learn. So this is the theory of knowledge is a concern with understanding. May comprehension ba? You can understand what is right and wrong. You can comprehend as well. So what it means to know. So, muna siya. So rather than study a particular subject, talk looks to pursue more conceptual ideas of what it takes to acquire knowledge and how to apply that to real-world scenarios. So mayon ka nga gitagan as if you're a teacher nga gitagaan ka nga mani siya pansiron ka nya wala kay knowledge. So unsa nimo unsa nimo pagkuha ato? Unsa nimo pag-comprehend? Kung sakto ba ni or dili ba ni? At least na kay knowledge ba? So attributes. This is the last aspect or statement nga atong mentioned earlier. Basta. So the theory of attributes deals with qualitative types of characteristics that are calculated by using quantitative measurements. So nganong na-mention nato ang qualitative o ang quantitative diri kay it's parts of our theory. So may kang theory na siya yung mga daghang parts or strategies nga angay natong i-measure when it comes to mga items nga itong igamiton sa mga test nato. So therefore, the attribute kinahanglan needs slightly different kinds of statistic treatment, which is the variables do not get. Alright? So the comparison, so makita nato dira ang CIT and RIT. So the comparison ni siya, may comparison is ato silang combine. We compare. Alright, so the test is the unit of analysis. Kung may CIT, it is the test is the unit of analysis. Kung may RRT, the item is the unit of analysis. So CIT, the test. Ang IRT is the item. Sa CIT, measure with kani. Isa ha, let's brush. Kani o kani. So muna siya ha. So, balik ta. So, it is a measure, so CIT is a measure with more item longer or more reliable than their counterparts. Comparing, so muna siya, counterparts. Wait. So comparing, so sa CIT is comparing scores from different measure can only be done when the task forms and measures are parallel. So sa IRT, in item response theory, it is the item's response of different measures can be compared as long as they are measuring the same latent rate. So in CIT, it is item properties depend on the representation sample. So sa IRT na po is item response don't depend on a representation sample. So dili na makita ang ilahang kalahian, kumbaga ang ilahang na kuan. Right. So positions, CIT positions in the latent trait continent is derived from comparing the test score with scores of the reference group. In IRT, it is the positions on the latent by comparing the distance between items on the ability scale. All items on the measures must have the same response categories, and IRT is the items on the measures can have different response categories. Next. When you say classical test theory or CTT is approximately 100 years old and still remain commonly used because it is inappropriate for a certain situation. It is simple enough that it can be used by many people without formal training in psychometrics. Most statistics are limited to means proportions, correlations. However, its simplicity means the lack sophistication to deal with numbers of very important measures probabilities. So these are the following. Sample dependency. In classical are all dependent and usable in a different sample. It results from IRT are simply independent with a linear transformation, that is, two samples of different ability levels can be easily converted on the same scale. So task dependency. A specific test form and do not deal with sparse matrix introduced by multiple forms linear and fly testing or adaptive testing. Weak linking equity. CIT has a number of methods for linking multiple forms, but they are weak compared to IRT. Measuring the range of students. Belt for the average students and do not measure high or low students very well. And conversely, statistics for very difficult or easy items are suspect. The fourth one is lack of accounting for guessing. Does not account for guessing a multiple choice exam. 5. Scoring. So in classical does not take into account item difficulty. Last would be our adaptive testing. Does not support adaptive testing in most cases. So classical test theory again, so we are focusing on our lesson Gino. So we assume that people are randomly selected, that T is our true score, becomes a random variable as well, and we get X equals T plus E. So therefore, in CTT, in classical test theory, we assume that error, so the normally distributed, the correlated with true score, and has a mean of 0. So in classical test theory versus RIT, so ato silang ilahi. So for example, a geometry test is given to student. Ang geometry test gihatag sa sa student no. Balik geometry test ang gihatag. So under the IRT, under the item response theory approach, isulay ta og estimate sa tag sa students to level on the Latin plate geometry ang kanang text. Naghatag nga test, which is geometry. So we try og level on this Latin plate influences the item response. So this will belongs to IRT. Muna siya IRT. So under the CIT, we try po tag estimate score on this geometry test and geometry like this test. So lahi ang IRT o classical test theory sa. So ang RT manggod is the student's level. Unya ang CT is ang score ng ilang na ano. Alright? So why is classical test theory is important? It is theory of testing based on the idea that persons observes or obtain score, and a test is the sum of the true score, error-free scores, and error score. The body of concepts and methods have formed the basis of psychological assessment, and classical test theory posits that observed scores are additive functions of true scores and error terms. True scores are the ideal value of constructs in a particular person or situation. So who made classical test theory? Kinsay gagama, or may tayong kinsay ga introduce mo yun nani? Si Frederick Lord. Si Frederick Lord and Melvin Novick are who created with organizing the psychometric developments of the time into a cohesive framework in their 1968 books, Statistical Theories of Mental Test Scores. Sila may founder. So these are the examples for classical test theory na itong gidiscuss. So it is a proportion of test takers who answered correctly. So may untang natin ito nga 30 students na 30 students nga naka-answer sakto pa jud out of total number of test takers. For example, an item difficulty score of 89 to 100 means that out of 100 people is 89 answered correctly. So bali na siya passing ba? Bali ang katong test taker nato na siya difficulty score, na siya na wala nang siran, pero out of 100 people, 89 naka-answered correctly, pero okay na to siya. Ito na siya classical theory. So in what ways are classical test theory and item response theory important in assessing learners? So as a BT students, importante ra gyapon ni naara gyapon at magamit ra gyapon nito siya in our new curriculum. Bisag old curriculum na ra gyapon ni siya. So in psychometric theory offers two approaches in analyzing test data. So classical test theory or CTT, don't forget this. So an item response theory and RT is both theories unable to predict outcomes of psychological tests by identifying parameters of item difficulty and ability of test taker. So these are one of the challenges na ma-encounter nato ang mga test taker mayon nga mga first year naman in our junior high, in our senior high, or even in the college, we try this kind of methods, which is classical test theory and item response theory. So take note, so X is an observed score. P is the true score. Ang kaning observed score, maniya ang katong akong gi-mention din ha. And E is a random error. For example, nalagyan po tayo example ha. So for example, let's assume na kay kuan. Kabalo ka nga 70% of all the material covered in a statistic course. Nya, this is your true score pa jud. Mo ni imong tinuod or final na score. Unya, a perfect end of semester test which doesn't exist should nga ideally ba reflect this true score. So sa tinuod di ay in reality your score around 65 to 75%. The 5% na katong wala nimo nakuha, the discrepancy from your true score is the error. Gets? So mo to siya. So mo to imong sayop. Muna yung nakalahi sa classical test theory. So understandable na siya na ito. Kaya nato nakasabot na ta. Again, 65. Nya 75. So na 5% of difference ha sa imong nakuha nga score. Nya katong 5% mo to imong error. Kunya kanang 65 mo na imong true score. So balik kaning 65 to 75 mo ni siya imong observed score. Then kaning E is kaning 5 mo na siya gitawag nga random error. So that is so the errors or katong 5% nga difference nga na-take nimo result are assumed to be normal distributed, which I mean of 0. So 0 ka, to wala kay score ato kay hypothetically, if you took the test an infinite number of times, you observed score should equal your true score. Syempre, muna siya. So, therefore, this is our conclusion. Kung mayroon tang conclusion, this is our last statement nga discuss nato, which is classical test theory ang atong main topic. So again, this is our conclusion. Known as the true score theory, assumes that each person has a true score. Kung ato pa ning reflects with ourselves, anadyo tayo true score, no? Which is T, muna siya. That would be obtained if there were no errors in measurement. A person's nga na true score is defined as the expected score over an infinite number of independent administrations of the scale. So, in classical test theory is an approach to measurement that considers the relationship between the expected score. Kung muna jud imong score, muna jud imong true score, dili na ka pwede mo mo lahi o mo pili. So that is your final score ba ya. So even though na kay for example ni take ka og out of 20 items, imong nakuha 10. Unya 10 ang imong discrepancy. Katong nga 10 mo to imong true score, unya katong nabilin mo to imong E which is 0 nga imong error ba. Mo to na wala nimo naansiran or sayop ka. So the word classical is used in a sense that the theory is considered to be the first practical applications of mathematics to describe the relationship. Lahi ang classic, lahi ang dynamic. CTT offers a relatively parsimonious, elegant, and intuitive way to scale individuals according to some theorized Latin construct. Nagigama. So this entry further describes CTT and its basis principles and estimation procedures. So of course, kung teacher ka or a future educator na kay magamit gyapon ni siya og na kay students so gamit jud kay ni siya nga method, no? So then discusses his framework for determining of measures proportions of true scores, variance, or standard error, may encounter nga error of measurement, item analysis, and validity is finally it looks like or the limitations to the theory. So muna siya. I hope you understand my report, ma'am, Derla. And so that would be my discussion that I represent that share na ako. So as you can see, even if you stumble, you're still moving forward by Victor Kiam. This is my quotation of the day. So alright. So that would be all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, ma'am, Derla, and God bless. Take care. Bye.